You finally win. Yet something inside you feels uneasy. You thought this moment would bring peace, but instead, your mind starts racing. What if it disappears? What if this was just luck? What if you can't do it again? It's strange, isn't it? You chase success for years, but when it finally arrives, you can't even enjoy it. Your chest tightens, your thoughts get louder, and somewhere deep inside, a quiet tension whispers, "This doesn't feel safe." This isn't about strategies or money. It's about understanding yourself. Mark Douglas once said, "Success will always seem so close, and yet always so elusive." He wasn't talking about charts. He was talking about you. Because the moment you touch success, it reflects everything you still don't believe about yourself. Every winning trade becomes a mirror, not of your skill, but of your sense of worth. You stare at the screen, seeing numbers rise, but feeling the same old resistance, the same doubt, the same need to prove yourself again. And that's the paradox. Success isn't the finish line. It's the moment your inner conflict wakes up. So why does success, the very thing you chased, make you want to run? Let's look closer, because beneath every victory, there's a quiet story your mind is still trying to tell. The first time I made real money, I couldn't sleep. I remember staring at the numbers glowing on the screen, profit bigger than I had ever seen, and feeling my chest tighten instead of relax. It wasn't excitement. It was fear, a quiet panic I couldn't explain. That night, I checked my phone every few minutes. My heart beat faster with every small market move, as if success had turned into something fragile, something I might break if I wasn't careful enough. It took me years to understand what was really happening. Mark Douglas wrote in Trading in the Zone that the freedom of trading, the lack of structure, the endless possibilities can create a kind of psychological imbalance. Most people crave rules, limits, boundaries. But here, in the market, there are none. It's you against infinity. And that kind of freedom exposes every part of you that still feels unsafe. You win, but instead of feeling free, you start clinging tighter. You double check. You overthink. You hesitate. You make plans not to lose instead of plans to grow. Because somewhere inside, the win didn't make you stronger. It made you scared of losing what you never believed you deserved. The truth is, success can be just as destabilizing as failure. Because success removes your favorite excuse. It strips away the story that says, "I just haven't had my break yet." Now that you've won, you have proof. And proof demands belief. But belief is what most traders never train. You learn how to analyze charts, not how to hold abundance. You learn how to manage risk, not how to feel safe in success. So when you finally achieve what you've been chasing, your mind rejects it because it doesn't match the image you still carry of yourself. Wait, have you ever noticed how your best trades often lead to your worst week? You make a big win, and suddenly you're impulsive. You enter too early. You break your rules. You start acting like the person who needs to lose just to feel normal again. That isn't lack of discipline. That's your nervous system trying to restore balance. The moment success lifts you too high, your old beliefs pull you back down because they were built in scarcity, in struggle, in proving yourself. And success threatens to erase that identity. That's why, when you win, it doesn't feel like a rival. It feels like exposure. Every insecurity you buried under years of effort now has nowhere to hide. And deep down, the fear isn't about the market turning against you. It's about you turning against yourself. Because once you've tasted success, staying successful requires something terrifying: stability. And stability means surrendering the chaos you've always used to feel alive. It's not fear of failure that ruins you. It's fear of staying successful. Every trader knows the rush. That moment when the numbers explode in your favor, you feel untouchable, limitless, like you've cracked the code. But what happens next isn't celebration. It's chaos. Because the same energy that lifts you up soon starts tearing you down. Mark Douglas wrote, "Greed and fear of loss form a self-perpetuating cycle." He wasn't exaggerating. It's a loop, a psychological pendulum swinging between euphoria and fear. The win triggers a rush of dopamine, a reward so random that your brain mistakes it for destiny. You think, "I've got it now. I finally understand the market." And that thought, that tiny spark of certainty, is the beginning of the fall. Because markets don't give rewards on schedule, they give them at random. And random rewards create addiction. It's the same mechanism that keeps gamblers glued to slot machines. Not because they're losing, but because they almost won. Every green candle becomes a dose. Every tick in your favor becomes validation. You start trading for the feeling, not for the process. Then the high fades. And when it does, your mind craves balance. So it manufactures punishment. A bad entry, a rule broken, a loss that shouldn't have happened. But deep down, you know exactly why it did. You punish yourself. Not because you hate winning, but because success threatens the identity built on struggle. You've spent years surviving setbacks, defining yourself as the one who keeps fighting back. So when you finally win, there's nothing left to fight, no battle to define you, no chaos to keep you sharp. And the absence of struggle feels like losing control. So the mind does what it knows best. It recreates the conditions of pain where you once felt safe. You over-leverage. You chase after missed moves. You accidentally break your plan. And then you say, "I knew it. I got careless." But that wasn't carelessness. That was comfort. You didn't slip. You returned. Returned to the emotional landscape that feels familiar. The place where you get to fight, prove, recover, rebuild. Because growth feels foreign, but struggle feels like home. Here's the truth. Success doesn't corrupt you. It reveals you. It exposes every belief that only knows how to survive, but not how to receive. And the more you win, the louder that inner resistance becomes. Part of you says, "I want consistency." But another voice whispers, "If I stop struggling, who will I be?" So you sabotage just enough to keep the story alive. You rebuild your pain just to remember who you are. That's why the self-punishment loop is so powerful. It's not logic, it's identity protection. The ego would rather be right about being broken than wrong about being worthy. So each time you rise, something inside quietly pulls you back, not out of fear, but out of loyalty, to the version of you that needed the fight. And until you see that clearly, you'll keep calling it bad luck, poor timing, or just another losing streak. But it's not that. It's your own belief system trying to restore emotional balance in the only way it knows, through chaos. So what if the enemy isn't failure, but your own definition of who deserves to win? You stand in front of the mirror, but it's not your reflection you're looking at, it's the person behind it, the one who still feels like an imposter. The profits are real, the account is green, but inside, something whispers, "This isn't me." For years, you've measured your worth by how much you can recover, how much you can endure, how many times you can rise after falling. So when the falling stops, you don't know who you are anymore. Mark Douglas wrote, "Fear doesn't come from the market. It comes from how we interpret information. The market doesn't judge your worth. It doesn't know your history. It doesn't care if you've won or lost. It simply reflects what you believe to be true about yourself." And that's what makes this mirror so uncomfortable. When you finally win, the market is no longer testing your strategy. It's testing your identity. You look at the reflection and see someone who's supposed to feel confident, but still flinches at the thought of losing it all. You see numbers that say success, but a posture that still belongs to survival. For years, I didn't fear losing money. I feared proving myself wrong, that I never belonged here. It wasn't the market that scared me. It was the idea that every win was one step closer to being exposed. as someone who didn't deserve it, so I built walls. Tiny invisible defenses, overanalyzing, over-controlling, convincing myself that perfection could protect me from pain. But perfection isn't protection. It's punishment. Because when you build your identity on struggle, peace feels unsafe. Every quiet moment of success becomes too loud to bear. And without realizing it, you start finding ways to break that silence, just to feel like yourself again. That's what self-sabotage really is. It's not destruction, it's preservation. Your mind isn't trying to ruin you, it's trying to keep you consistent with who you've always believed you were. It's protecting the version of you that once needed chaos to feel in control. But here's the irony. That version of you only existed because it couldn't see another way. The moment you win, your old self panics because it no longer has a role to play. It can't fight, it can't fix, it can't prove. So it tries to recreate the battlefield just to feel alive again. And you, caught between who you were and who you're becoming, mistake the war inside for market volatility. But it's not volatility, it's transformation. Because every win confronts you with the question your old self fears most. Can I allow myself to stay here? To truly belong in success, you have to let go of the part of you that only knows how to earn it through pain. You have to accept that being enough was never something you had to prove. It was something you had to remember. And that remembrance doesn't come from charts or strategy or another winning trade. It comes from standing in front of the mirror and finally saying, I belong here. But what if you could rewrite that contract? What if success no longer meant betraying who you were, but honoring who you've become? There's a moment every trader faces, the quiet after the storm, when the screen stops moving and you're left alone, with the voice that whispers, I'll lose it soon. That voice doesn't come from the market. It comes from memory, from the version of you that once survived disappointment by expecting it. Mark Douglas wrote in The Disciplined Trader, beliefs don't disappear. You can't destroy them. You can only withdraw energy from them. You can't fight your old patterns into silence. You have to stop feeding them. So the next time that thought appears, I'll lose it soon. Don't react. Don't argue. Just watch it pass, like a cloud drifting through the mind. Because the moment you stop defending against fear, you stop energizing it. Most traders try to fix their mindset the same way they fix a broken setup, by tweaking rules, by adding filters, by forcing discipline. But the mind doesn't heal through force. It heals through awareness. Awareness turns reaction into choice, and choice breaks the loop. Write this down, not as affirmation, as truth you're finally ready to live by. I can be successful and safe. Let that sentence sit with you, because it contradicts everything your old self believed was necessary to survive. For years, you thought safety only existed in control, and control came from effort, from always preparing for what could go wrong. But safety doesn't come from control. It comes from trust. Trust in your preparation. Trust in probabilities. Trust that you don't have to lose to feel alive. The real contract you need to break isn't with the market. It's with your past. You made an unconscious agreement long ago. I'll stay small if it means I stay safe. I'll struggle if it means I won't lose myself. But that contract has expired. You've outgrown it. And every time you self-destruct, you're not failing. You're trying to return to the identity that once kept you safe. Here's the twist. The reason you self-destruct isn't punishment. It's protection. Protection from becoming someone new. Because growth feels like loss. When your identity is built on survival, letting go of who you were feels like betrayal. Until you realize it's liberation. The pain isn't from change itself. It's from resisting who you're becoming. True freedom isn't about never losing again. It's about allowing yourself to keep what you've earned, without guilt, without tension, without waiting for it to vanish. You've spent years mastering risk management. Now it's time to master receiving. Success isn't something you chase. It's something you learn to hold. And when you hold it with calm, not fear, it stops running away. To change your results, you don't need a new strategy. You need a new identity. There comes a point when the chase ends, when you've made peace with the numbers and the chart is no longer a battlefield, just a reflection of rhythm and chance. Mark Douglas wrote in Trading in the Zone, "Consistency doesn't come from control. It comes from the belief that anything can happen." For most traders, that sentence feels impossible because we've been trained to believe that control equals safety, that certainty equals success. But the truth is, the tighter you hold on, the faster everything slips away. Freedom isn't in control. It's in acceptance. Acceptance that every trade is unique. Acceptance that every outcome belongs to probability, not identity. Acceptance that wins and losses carry the same message. Data, not judgment. When you finally reach that place, something inside you softens. You stop trying to predict. You stop trying to force. You start allowing. It's not weakness, it's awareness. Because awareness lets you act without emotional interference, to see the market as it is, not as your fears or hopes need it to be. Imagine yourself there. You take a trade, it wins. You write it down, you breathe, you move on. No adrenaline, no fireworks, no collapse, just calm presence, just flow. You no longer need success to validate you, and you no longer need failure to humble you. You've learned to stay centered while everything else moves. That's what Douglas meant by the zone. It isn't a mystical state. It's the mind finally free from expectation. Because when you think in probabilities, you accept that anything can happen, and that truth doesn't scare you anymore. You no longer measure worth by what the market gives or takes. You measure it by how little it can disturb your peace. That's the real win. Not the one on the chart, but the one within. When you no longer need to control outcomes, you begin to influence them naturally, not through fear, but through presence. And that's the paradox of mastery. The moment you stop chasing certainty, you start becoming consistent. When success no longer excites or scares you, that's when it stays. The screen glows again. Numbers rise in green, just like they did at the beginning. But this time, the trader doesn't lean forward. He simply breathes, a quiet smile on his face. No tension, no rush, just calm. Because he finally understands what all those charts were trying to teach him. It was never about predicting the future. It was about finding peace in the present. Mark Douglas once wrote, "The market didn't change. You did." And that's the truth. The market never owed you anything. It was always a mirror, reflecting every belief, every fear, and every doubt you carried inside. But now the reflection is different because you are. When you stop needing success to prove your worth, you finally deserve it. Not because you conquered the market, but because you stopped fighting yourself. This journey was never about making money. It was about making peace. And once peace becomes your foundation, consistency stops being a dream. It becomes who you are. If this message hits you harder than a losing trade, take a moment. Don't chase certainty. Build calm. This video isn't financial advice. It's emotional awareness. Because the zone isn't out there, it's within.